I think in the recent years, we've seen sort of a lot of Bitcoiners say, okay, America's not the place you should be living. If you're a Bitcoiner, you shouldn't live in America. You should live in, whether it be Dubai or, El Salvador. Nothing against those places. I've never been to Dubai. I like El Salvador a lot. It's amazing what they've done. But like this kind of like almost like anti-American sentiment in terms of like, nah, this isn't a good place for Bitcoiners. I disagree with that fundamentally, because I think that America, again, the fact that you can be armed to the fucking teeth in America actually makes a huge difference. And the fact that we do have certain laws in place that allow you to protect yourself and meet violence with violence in the form of self-defense is really, really meaningful. And do you see, with like, is any part of your thesis kind of around like, okay, there's actually going to be a shift towards like, Bitcoiners are going to bring their physical bodies, but also their capital in cyberspace back to America because of these protections that do exist for Americans, because you can take your safety into your own hands. Is that something you guys are kind of like theorizing a little bit? Because that's the vibe I'm getting.
100%. And this is actually sort of one of the more distant goals, and what Jesse alluded to earlier about doing some work within the political sphere, is that we feel very strongly that like America is really the only place that Bitcoin has a true chance of success, and it's because of the powerful constitutional protections that we have and the ability of the sovereignty of individual states to counteract a rogue federal government. And using those powers to balance against one another, we feel like there's a very, very powerful apparatus to be able to resist state overreach. And furthermore, the United States is one of the only places that you actually are entitled to the castle doctrine, which means that if someone is coming into your home intent on violence and wanting to rob you or cause harm against you or your property, you do have a right to engage in deadly force against those individuals. And we believe that this is going to become a very key and critical aspect of being able to provide the self-sovereignty. And one of the things that we stand next to with Vora is that, like, let's say that somebody has a Vora safe and somebody does come to their home to rob them. When they engage in using deadly force against them, like, we will have their back 100%. We will pay for their lawyers. We will take on the entire cost of making sure that we push that forward. Because to us, this is a really important public demonstration of that. Like, you own a Vora vault. Our job is to help protect and secure you. Like, we do not end just at the keys, but this is actually about you as a Bitcoiner. And this is about us creating a human-centric Bitcoin company that knows and understands the reason that you own Bitcoin is because of the self-sovereignty that that gives you. And that's what we're in service towards. Like, our job doesn't just end at the keys. It ends when we know that you're safe and can provide that. And that's the same reason why we'll provide investigative teams, and the same reason why we'll provide rapid response teams, is that while these are going to be very expensive and difficult problems to solve, they must be solved if we are actually to be able to say that we are people that are self-sovereign.
Yeah, and as hyper-Bitcoinization happens, we're going to have access to substantial resources to deploy against these problems. And before I became an engineer and a cryptographer, I was a lawyer. I practiced law for 10 years. Then became inspired by Bitcoin and the cypherpunk vision and the idea that code is law. But I have those roots in my legal training, and Vora has a legal and political strategy. And how we see it is, yes, America in many ways has strayed from the founding principles. The Constitution's been eroded. We have these problems that ERIK's highlighted in his writings about permanent states of emergency, suspensions of the normal legal order. We've seen with Snowden and, countless examples of how the principles of this country are not as intact as we would like them to be. But those are our roots. And we do have the Constitution, and we do have the vision and philosophy of the founding fathers and what influenced them, John Locke and Rousseau, and the fundamental principles of liberty and freedom and natural rights and natural law. This is the foundation of this country, and that's never going to go away. And so that's something very powerful that we can tap into, and that we can make the case that self-sovereignty in Bitcoin is an extension of the American political tradition. It is in line with what the founding fathers fought for, the same sort of principles, I have no doubt that if they were alive today, they would be Bitcoiners. And so we are continuing that tradition, and we can take that to the courts. We can take that to the Supreme Court, and we can make that case that what we're doing here is in line with the fundamental legal political principles of the Constitution, and we can fight and win those battles. And we've seen with the NRA their ability to succeed that way, whether it's through lobbying and creating a political situation where gun rights cannot be eroded, or winning in the courts and protecting those rights. And so that's the same model we're going to be using with Vora, is that we're going to be establishing in the law and in the political system that self-sovereignty is a sacrosanct political constitutional principle that cannot be violated under any circumstances.
What does that look like? I mean, and Case, and I'm curious too, does this dovetail in with your VP bid alongside American HODL for the presidential run? Is the plan all coming together now?
Apparently. So we'll need to have some great legal conflict where we're obviously thrown away, and I'll just, at that point, that's when I have to be like, we clearly have to overthrow the political establishment. But with that being said, I've been shocked at the amount of tertiary curiosity that's sort of gone on with the Orange Party, and I literally have not spoke to anybody, normie or otherwise, who I haven't been like, look, both parties are absolutely corrupt beyond repair at this point. And so, do you agree with that? And, I'll get Himon and Han, but they'll be like, yeah, both are extremely problematic. And, I really do hope that we'll actually get a sincere and realistic Orange Party movement that is committed to the radical principles. And I'm very pedantic about this. I'm not talking about a traditional standard political party, but I'm essentially talking about a rogue syndicalist methodology of having people be like, I'm part of the Orange Party. This is about the education and allowing for individuals to hold and use Bitcoin as self-sovereign individuals to influence state-level politics, and really to get people on board with understanding that, if you identify with red or blue, you're the enemy. You're the person that has allowed for our country to be destroyed. You're the one that is standing aside and saying that either one of these people who are stealing and destroying the goodness that our country has, that you're on their side. And because you identify that way, you're my enemy. I don't want that, but it's very clear that if your guy gets into power, you're okay with them stealing from me. You're okay with them taking my money and using that to make war against people who I've never met and I don't have conflict with. And I think that's a despicable and horrible thing. I don't know. I always find it really interesting that when you come back to the thing of both parties want to use your money to murder other people, and you're okay with that. No one's ever like, yeah, I'm okay with it. Most people object to it, but it's that's a very real truth. And I apologize that it might make you feel uncomfortable and it might be difficult to look at, but it is true. And Obama, who is largely celebrated as being this liberal ideal, it's really important to understand that, as a constitutional lawyer, he used his understanding of the Constitution to overcome it, specifically so he could do things like kill American children abroad using drone bombing. That happened. That's a real thing. And I find it deeply alarming that people want to be like, well, he was the son of a terrorist. And it's oh, I didn't realize when we disagree with people, we can kill their children, particularly when they're Americans as well. Interesting.
Give the man another Nobel Peace Prize. Amazing. Wow. No, nothing says peace like bombs, but I guess Nobel, and dynamite.
That's his whole shtick, right?
Yeah, right. It kind of worked together. No, I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in these next few years and decades, because I think there's no denying that we are in the middle of a fourth turning. I'm also of the opinion, this is a thesis I'm working on, I might even have to write about it, but that we're seeing a convergence of cycles. If you're familiar with Polybius's anacyclosis, we also seem to be somewhere near the end of that cycle in the oglocracy, verging on the mob rule sense. We're in the midst of a long-term debt cycle. If you look at Ray Dalio's, we're in the midst of a bunch of other, all of these different cycles that have been proposed by various thinkers. We seem to be nearing the tipping point of all of them. And I think that's going to make for very, very drastic and violent change. And I mean violent both in the, let's say, metaphorical sense, but then also probably in the literal sense. that's typically how things happen when there's massive changes, is there is violence. I mean, a little bit to the south of you guys right now in California, there is a lot of violence going on. I don't know how that's going to resolve itself. Maybe it just won't. It seems that these things tend not to resolve themselves, but they're mostly peaceful, so it's okay. But how do you guys prepare for the, like, are you building for the world that is now, or are you building for the world that is to come? Is it a little bit of both? Because like, I think you're the only company that is tackling both sides of this. Again, let's say the cryptographic side of this and the very physical human side of this. How do you like build with the structures we have now, but then prepare yourself for what may be an incredibly tumultuous period where the reorganization of the world makes it look vastly different than it is today?
We live in the future, basically. Like we're already in the hyper Bitcoinized world, and we're just working backwards from there. And we think that's something that almost no Bitcoin company and few Bitcoiners really have the conviction about hyper Bitcoinization and really take it seriously and really believe with 100% certainty that that's where we're headed, that is going to happen, that there's going to be massive disruption because of it. And that's our base case. We know that's happening for sure. And so we're trying to think through, okay, if that is happening, what kind of companies do we need to exist? What kind of products do we need to exist? What kind of services? What kind of political philosophies? What kind of legal frameworks? What are the things that we need to put in place right now so that when this event arrives, we're ready for it, we're prepared for it, and that ideally it can be nonviolent, or at least the minimum amount of violence that can occur? Because if we can plan in advance and if we can put the right systems in place, it doesn't need to be violent. It doesn't need to take that form. And that's one of the most powerful things about Bitcoin that we've never had before in history, which is that we can completely transform the legal, economic, and political system without any coercion whatsoever. Just by providing a superior alternative, that's going to create the change. Just by providing ideas, by providing mathematics, by providing technology, that will win people over, and we can establish our moral superiority to the status quo, because the status quo its essence is violence. That's how it operates. Everything is coercive. Everything is through at the barrel of the gun or a jackbooted thug. Like, that's how it operates. That's how it thinks. For any kind of social change, it can only do that through throwing people in cages. Bitcoin is different. Bitcoin doesn't need to use those mechanisms to create change. And that's a bright line that we are drawing to say how we are different from the status quo, how we're going to win over the hearts and minds, because we have a better system that is more peaceful, that is more beneficial, that is more free. And so we think a lot about the future. We think a lot about how to prepare today for what's coming. And ERIK and I have been in Bitcoin for a while now, and we kind of have a track record of being able to anticipate things that nobody thinks are going to happen, and yet they occur. And so we're just kind of bringing that to the next level.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons that's allowed for us to start designing it in the way that it is, because it's really only even been in the last few years that the technologies have been available to actually try to be able to build a truly open source and verifiable computer from silicon to software. Like these FPGAs, like the new Tropic Square chip, like these are all very new advancements. And then when you start to pair this stuff with the advancements that we're seeing in AI, with the advancements that we've been seeing in drone tech, there becomes a very different future that's available, where the asymmetric relationship between the state, violent actors, and the individual allows for itself to actually become much more equalized. And so, like, I feel very confident that within 5 years, that any individual that has a Vora Vault at their house, there is going to be triggers that are going to allow for them to deploy their drone surveillance. And anybody that has came to that house will be marked and surveilled, like their gate recognition will be tracked, and that information will be used to identify them. And like that's something that we think is really important, because we want violent thugs and criminals to know, like, you won't have somewhere to hide. Like, you have now permanently branded and marked yourself with that you are an individual that will go after our customers, and we have an entire team and division of people that are dedicated to finding you and bringing you to justice. And that's because we now exist at this end state where the law is a highly dysfunctional thing. And if somebody does choose to rob you, legal or otherwise, in other words, the state choosing to steal from you or criminals, it's not clear if justice will actually be delivered. And that's one of the reasons that we really believe that we need to start empowering ourselves and taking this into our own hands, because if we allow for ourselves to get to a hyper-Bitcoinized world without a product like this, it's going to be much more threatening, difficult, and scary. And the truth is it's going to be much more violent. And it's going to be much more violent because we won't have active deterrent solutions that people will know and understand and will be branded towards that. And so, and the other one is that, like, as large and as much potential as this company has, again, it comes back to, like, we're building this for philosophical reasons. Like, it's really important to us to have this product out in the world, not because it's going to make us both a bunch of money, but because people deserve to have this new and different upgrade that truly allows for them to have sovereign custody of their Bitcoin rather than needing to collaborate with somebody for that sovereignty or just try to take it all on their own.